There's a certain sound the human brain isn't meant to process in its own home. It's not a scream or a crash. It's laughter. Not just any laughter, her laughter, paired with a man's voice I didn't recognize. That was the first thing that felt off. The second was the way my key stuck in the lock, like someone had deadbolted it from the inside. I turned it slow, half expecting to find a plumber, maybe a neighbor dropping something off. Instead, I got Mason. He was barefoot, on my kitchen tiles, holding a knife, not threateningly, no. Casually. He was slicing lime wedges for cocktails, like this was his Friday night. "Hey man," he said, no urgency. No apology. "Didn't think you'd be back so soon." He didn't ask who I was, which told me a lot. My wife stood behind him, in leggings and one of my old t-shirts. She didn't look surprised either, not even a twitch. Just leaned on the counter like this was a casual dinner party, and I was the one intruding. He reached into the fridge, found the six-pack I kept in the back corner, cracked one open, and took a swig. "She told me you'd probably sulk for weeks before facing it. Guess she gave you too much credit." He grinned. "But hey, she's upgrading." I didn't say a word, just looked at her. She looked right back. No shame, no guilt, just boredom. Like she was already checking out of a long, dull meeting. And that's when he made the mistake. "You should go pack, man. Take the guest room tonight, if you need. I mean, obviously, we'll get things sorted legal-wise." Like it was already his house. His fridge. His beer. His woman. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I had forgotten how bold stupidity could be when it thought it had the upper hand. Instead, I nodded. "Okay," I said, calm as ever. Then I turned, walked up the stairs, and shut the bedroom door behind me. But I didn't pack. I didn't scream, didn't smash anything, didn't even pace. I sat down at my desk, pulled open the bottom drawer, and took out a small black notebook. I hadn't touched it in years. Not because I didn't need it, but because I'd hoped I wouldn't. There's something you should know. I'm not on social media. I don't do company Zoom calls. I built my firm from nothing and stayed in the shadows on purpose. When our valuation crossed $300 million, I didn't do the press rounds. I didn't let them take pictures. That anonymity was intentional, strategic, and in this moment, very, very useful. Because this fool, Mason, worked for me. He just didn't know it. As I flipped through the pages of that notebook, I could hear them downstairs. She was giggling now. He was talking about his big pitch last week, how his boss finally saw his potential, how the old guard just needs to get the hell out of the way. I wrote down his full name. I knew it already. LinkedIn had his face, and my HR reports had his employee ID. But I wanted to write it. Make it physical, real, tactile. Mason J. Crowley, mid-level strategist. Loud, overconfident, mediocre. Hired 6 months ago through referral. I had flagged him during a random internal memo scan when I noticed his personal branding posts on company time. He wasn't smart, but he was ambitious, in that brittle, performative way that made for great LinkedIn rants and disastrous ethics reviews. He thought I was just her husband, some washed-up, middle-aged tax accountant who got outmaneuvered by a cocky younger guy with good hair and no depth. And that was fine. I needed it that way, because it made what came next cleaner. By the way, if you're still reading this and haven't subscribed yet, now's a good time. Over 90% of people listen without hitting that button, but it actually helps my team keep going. No pressure, just saying. All right, back to it. I opened my laptop, typed in a password that hadn't been used in over a year, and watched the encrypted dashboard open. It wasn't flashy. No spy movie interface. Just rows and columns of names, emails, behavioral flags. I scrolled until I found him. Mason Crowley. Flagged for clocking excessive personal device use during secure client windows. 2 internal HR notes for conduct during off-site meetings. 1 confidential note from a female junior associate about boundary issues, withdrawn before it escalated. And here he was, in my kitchen, drinking my beer, with my wife, who, I should note, was still technically on my health insurance. She used to joke that I was so boring I was basically background noise. I used to laugh along. Thought it was self-deprecating humor. Now I realized it wasn't a joke. It was the lens she'd chosen to look through. Mason, with his "I'm a disruptor" swagger and podcast quotes, made her feel like she was finally starring in her own edgy little drama. She didn't realize the script was written years ago, and I never stopped editing. Downstairs, he turned up the music. Something with bass and zero taste. He was making himself comfortable. That was fine, because I was about to make him unforgettable. He pulled the curtains open like he paid the mortgage. Set his boots on my coffee table, mud still on them. Put on music that rattled the art on the walls. The same art she once told me gave the house class. Now she nodded along to some synth-drenched garbage while he made himself a double whiskey in my glass. "This is a great space," he said. "Open concept. You ever think about knocking down that corner wall?" She shrugged. It was always his thing. He liked it closed. "Well," Mason smirked, "you've upgraded. Open it up. Add some light." She laughed at that. Not belly laughed. Just that smug, performative titter women use when they're not laughing at the joke. They're laughing for the man telling it. To keep the illusion afloat, I stood upstairs, in the hallway, back against the wall, watching them through the thin slit between blinds. The angle gave me just enough of the kitchen. I didn't want to see everything. I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. Mason poured another drink and leaned back like he was auditioning for a cologne ad. "Anyway," he said, stretching his arms wide. "Once this thing with Curtis lands, I'm looking at a VP track. You know what that means?" She raised an eyebrow. He grinned. "Lexus. Maybe an M-Series. Depends how generous they are. If they don't play ball, I'll start taking calls." And then, the cherry on top, he added, "The CEO's probably too old to even know what half of us do. I swear a guy's a ghost. Just signs checks." She giggled again. My stomach didn't turn from betrayal. It turned from the weight of how stupid both of them were. Because the ghost they were mocking had an exact replica of Mason's onboarding file on a flash drive in the bedroom safe. Because the CEO who didn't know what they did built the job descriptions himself. Every role, every department, every quarterly review cycle. And no one knew my face, not even at the board level. When we went public, I stepped away from the spotlight, let the COO handle press, let marketing invent a founder figurehead who looked good in suits. That was the point. I got to walk around conferences unnoticed. I got to ride elevators with interns and listen to what they actually thought. I got to sit in meetings, say nothing, and learn everything. Now Mason was bragging about leaking parts of the Curtis brief, the very deal I had brokered 2 months ago, using a shell firm. He thought the inside scoop he fed his friend at that trash finance blog was his ticket to relevance. He didn't know we had already flagged his IP. We just hadn't acted yet. Yet, the arrogance didn't bother me. Not really. It was the assumption, the automatic, unthinking assumption, that I was disposable, replaceable, weak. That because I was quiet, I had no claws. Because I didn't perform power, I had none. He turned to her and said, "So when do you think he'll actually leave?" She exhaled, bored. "I don't know. He'll come around. He always caves." Caves. I stood still, perfectly still, because I wanted to remember that word. Then Mason leaned over and kissed her, like the kitchen, the house, her mouth, her time, her decisions. All of it was his now. My hand gripped the window frame. Not from jealousy, not rage, from the sheer absurdity of it all. I had spent 15 years shielding her from storms she never even knew existed. She thought being married to me was boring. She never noticed the wires I ran beneath the floorboards, the protection clauses I inserted into every shared asset, the passive structures I built under her name, because I wanted her to feel independent, without risking real exposure. And now here she was, laughing with a man who used company Wi-Fi to leak confidential decks from his work laptop. He started opening drawers. Asked her, "You guys got one of those milk frother things?" She said, "Yeah, somewhere." He said, "You'll have to show me where stuff is later. I'm going to start bringing my protein blends over." He clapped his hands. "Oh, remind me to measure the garage. Got to make sure it fits the new ride once I close the bonus." She gave him a little wink and said, "This weekend, maybe?" Deal. That was the moment I knew. It wasn't about dignity anymore. It was about documentation. I walked back into the bedroom, opened the safe, and pulled out the second drive. The one labeled Maven Flag. I plugged it in. Watched the screen light up. 10 folders. Each with a name. Each a profile. Each someone who once thought they were irreplaceable. And now, just archived errors. I dragged Mason's name into a new folder. Labeled it. Live case, priority A. Let the system begin syncing. He wanted to play CEO? Then he could experience how quickly a real one buries people like him. When I came down, the music was louder than before, as if volume somehow asserted control. He was sprawled across the couch now, one arm tossed over the back, the other lazily holding a tumbler filled to the brim with my 12-year Glendronach. That bottle was a gift from my old mentor, retired now, living quietly on a boat in Maine, and I'd been saving it for our anniversary. The one she apparently forgot. Mason looked up and smirked like a kid caught raiding the liquor cabinet. "Don't worry," he said. "I left you enough for a toast with the lawyer." The folder in my hand wasn't thick. It didn't need to be. He assumed it was paperwork, divorce filings, maybe property assessments, or a note saying, "We tried." That's what people like him expect. Dramatic paperwork, maybe even a scene. But drama requires a reaction. I was done giving him that. That for the divorce lawyer? He chuckled, tipping his glass toward me. Tell him she's already taken. She laughed again. The same brittle laugh she'd used all night. The kind you use when your only real line of defense is to pretend you're unbothered. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at them. I walked into the kitchen, slid the folder gently onto the marble countertop, right between them, and walked out. No words. No flourish. Just a presence they couldn't understand. He called after me. Not even gonna fight. I stopped on the first step, hand on the railing, and turned just enough for my voice to carry. I don't need to. Silence. The kind of silence that makes people uneasy because they don't know what it means. Mason shifted in his seat. My wife tilted her head, a trace of confusion in her smirk. Because for the first time, she wasn't sure if I was bluffing. Back upstairs, I could hear them again. Not the giggles this time. More hushed tones, curious, wary. He asked her what the folder was. She said, probably some petty list of things he wants to keep. He opened it. I heard the manila crack. And then, the pause. I imagined his eyes scanning the first few lines of the report, marked confidential, internal risk assessment. Mason Crowley. Date of hire, 6 months prior. Position, strategic ops, tier 2. Notes. Anomalous login behavior flagged across multiple devices. Project Curtis brief exposure traced to Crowley access log. Audio snippets recovered. Unsanctioned discussion of deal pipeline with third-party journalist. High probability of NDA breach. Suggested, escalate to compliance lead with executive oversight. The documents included screenshots of Slack messages he'd deleted, metadata from the attachments he forwarded to his personal email, thinking no one would trace the MAC address. Even a partial transcript from a drunken voice message he left a friend bragging about knowing too much and having dirt that could make him jump a level overnight. He'd been sloppy. He just didn't know the right people were watching. What he also didn't know, what made the blood drain from his face when he hit the second page, was that the oversight authority on the investigation wasn't some faceless VP or illegal intern. It was me, not a signature, just my initials, stamped in a digital watermark only insiders recognized. DLC//PHI-1. He had mocked me. In my house. On my payroll. After violating multiple federal confidentiality laws. And I had just handed him a folder with his professional obituary inside. My wife asked, "What is it?" He didn't answer. Instead, I heard him get up, walk to the sink, pour the rest of my scotch down the drain, and run the water like it would wash off what he'd just seen. I sat at my desk upstairs, phone in hand. One message, already drafted, blinking on the screen. 2. Compliance lead. Subject, Crowley, folder drop complete. Body, he has it. Initiate flag. Wait for external ping. Do not alert PR, yet. I didn't send it. Not yet. Because the best part of letting a man think he's in control is watching how quickly he drowns when he realizes the boat's been leaking for weeks. And you were the one who handed him the bucket with the hole in it. Downstairs, Mason's voice cracked. He can't do anything, right? I mean, he's just her husband. A beat of silence. Then, softly, from her, "I don't know." That was the first honest thing she'd said all night. He let the folder sit there like it was a menu he didn't feel like reading. It made him uneasy. I could tell, the way his eyes flicked toward it every few minutes, then away. But he wasn't ready to admit it. Not to her, not to himself. So instead, he defaulted to noise. He switched the music to something more aggressive. Called it focus mode. Then turned on the speakerphone and started dialing people from work like he was quarterbacking a startup launch out of my living room. I sat at the top of the stairs, just out of view, quiet. The kind of quiet that makes fools talk louder. First call, Brett from sales. Yeah, Mason said, pacing near the kitchen island. I'm at her place now. He's still here, but basically done. Some folder crap, trying to look serious. A pause. Then laughter. No, man, I'm not worried. He looks like he still uses fax machines. Honestly, you should see the guy. He's like a taxidermied accountant. Another laugh. This time hers. Second call, Damien from BizDev. Dude, listen. Curtis is gonna land. I can feel it. Once it does, I want that chair across from Jake. I'll handle APAC. I've been pulling weight, right? You've seen the decks. Better than anything the old guys ever scribbled on a napkin. A grunt of agreement. Then the kicker. I mean, whoever he is, the CEO signs from behind a curtain. He's a myth. A nameplate. Some old fart with a P.O. box and a bad knee. That's when I looked down at my hands. The skin on my palms is rougher than it should be for a guy who spends most days behind screens. One scar, right along the lifeline. A slice from a utility knife, back when I was laying cable in the first office space we leased, a place that didn't even have heating for the first 2 months. I signed that warehouse lease with a bandaged hand and an empty wallet. And now I was a nameplate. I sat back. Let it sink in. Not the insult, the perspective. This was never about my wife, not really. She was just an echo chamber for the kind of man Mason always was. Performative, transactional, and hungry for things he thought made him powerful. He didn't love her. He loved what she represented. Validation that he was worth something. She mistook that hunger for passion. I mistook her loyalty for permanence. That was on me. But this was all on them. Downstairs, Mason finally opened the fridge and pulled out leftovers I made from scratch 2 nights before the trip. Braised short ribs, still in the container I'd labeled. He microwaved them like he paid for the damn groceries. Between bites, he said to her, "When this Curtis thing drops, we should look at that place by the marina." She asked, "The one with the rooftop garden?" "Yeah, gated, too. We won't have to see him if he tries to come back around." I walked back into the bedroom, shut the door behind me, sat at the desk, took a breath. Then I picked up the phone and tapped out a message. To Russell Franks. Subject, house visit. Body, it's time. Use the back entrance. Knock twice. Bring the packet. Russell is head of compliance. He reports directly to me. Not the COO, not the board me. And Russell doesn't visit employees at home unless something has gone severely off script. I hit send. I didn't feel angry. I felt still. The kind of still you only find right before an avalanche. I looked at the clock. 7:41 p.m. Russell would need 20, maybe 25 minutes, depending on traffic. I left the bedroom, leaned against the banister again, and listened to Mason call someone else. Sounded like a podcast producer he was trying to impress. "Yeah, man, I got sound bites for days. I'll send you a few takes tomorrow. Might even throw in a few Curtis teases, you know? Wink wink kind of stuff." He wasn't subtle, but he was loud. The worst kind of liability. My wife finally asked, "What's actually in that folder?" He waved a fork in the air. "Just some passive-aggressive financial stuff. Property splits or whatever. I'm not reading it. That's what lawyers are for." She didn't push. She never did. That was always the difference between us. She needed noise to feel alive. I preferred precision, measured silence. And silence was coming to collect. Because in exactly 31 minutes, the man at the door wouldn't be a process server. It would be Russell. And he wouldn't come with questions. He'd come with answers. The chime cut through the music like a scalpel. One sharp note, then silence. Mason, mid-sentence on yet another self-congratulatory call, didn't even pause. Just yelled toward the hallway without looking up. "Babe, get that." She sighed, stood, smoothed her leggings like she was answering a door at a spa, not the house she was actively co-opting. I stayed at the top of the stairs, still, arms folded, watching from above. When she opened the door, the smirk fell off her face so fast it was like watching a mask slide off. She didn't speak, didn't move, just stepped back. The man who entered didn't knock, didn't wait for permission. He moved like time owed him an apology. Tailored coat, damp from the drizzle. Leather gloves, half off, still clutched in one hand. Eyes scanning past her like she wasn't even there. He was pale, breathless, jaw-locked. "Where is he?" he asked. Not a question, a demand. Mason, now rising from the couch like a Roman senator, gave the man a lazy once-over. "You're looking at him." No response. No glance. No acknowledgement. The man's eyes locked on mine, standing silently at the top of the staircase. He exhaled like he'd just found oxygen. "Sir," he said, voice low, tight, urgent. "We have a situation." Mason blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" The man still didn't look at him. That's when Mason stepped forward, puffing his chest a little. "I think there's been a mistake, my guy. You're looking for someone else." Still nothing. The man's gaze remained fixed on me, like everything else in the room had stopped existing. My wife finally spoke, her voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. "What's going on?" The man didn't answer her either. He removed a sealed envelope from inside his coat and held it tightly. Not out, not offered, just held, like it was too important to let go without the right words being said first. Mason scoffed. "Look, man, whoever you are." Finally, the man cut in. "You need to sit down and stay quiet." His tone wasn't angry. It was clinical, precise, like someone in crisis management who's 5 seconds away from calling security. Mason froze mid-step. His expression cracked for the first time. Not fear, Not yet. But the confusion of a man whose reflection just blinked at him. I walked slowly down the stairs. Each step measured, soundless. My eyes didn't leave the man at the door. His face twitched slightly when I got close, not in discomfort, but in relief. Like he'd just confirmed the worst-case scenario and now had a plan. "I'm assuming," I said quietly, "that what I flagged finally reached your desk?" He nodded once. "Escalated 30 minutes ago. I came myself." "Good." Mason opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Who the hell are you?" I turned to him. There it was, the crack in his voice. The shift. I didn't answer him. I just took the envelope from the man's hand and opened it slowly. Inside, a printed copy of an internal breach alert. Severity level 3. Time-stamped. Detailed. Not just about data. About behavior. About unethical proximity to a named source. The source? Mason. I handed it back. "Walk me through it." The man straightened his back. Whistleblower evidence confirmed. 2 audio leaks from secure decks. One flagged under Curtis. One under Keelridge. Both traced to a company-issued device, IP matched to his terminal. Timestamped during NDA-sensitive review sessions. Legal notified? "They're waiting on your go. Board's been looped." PR? "Not yet. Waiting to see if it hits press first." Mason took a step back. "You're making a mistake. He's my ex's husband. This isn't a thing." The man finally turned to face him. "Son," he said, his voice flat as cement, "that man signs your payroll." You could hear the silence after that. Not a metaphor. You could feel the air retract, like the room realized it was too full of lies and needed to breathe again. My wife sat down, not because she was told, because her legs couldn't hold her anymore. Mason, to his credit, didn't collapse. He clenched, like maybe he thought he could still talk his way through it. Maybe with charm, maybe with volume. I walked to the kitchen, opened the fridge, pulled out the last untouched water bottle, and took a sip. Then I looked at him. "You were told the CEO was a ghost," I said. "You just didn't think he'd walk into his own house." He didn't respond. He couldn't. I took each step like I was walking down into a performance I had written, directed, and now, finally, decided to star in. Mason stood there with his mouth half open, halfway between a question and a gulp. The cocky spread of his shoulders had vanished, replaced by something more brittle. His boss, Russell, stood rigid near the door, glancing between us like someone about to defuse a landmine. "Wait," Mason said, gesturing toward me with an awkward laugh. "Can someone please tell me what the hell is going on? Who even are you?" Russell didn't even blink at him. Instead, he turned his head, slow, surgical, and looked at Mason like he was a petri dish gone wrong. "You moron," he muttered. That was it. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just a flatline statement, like a death sentence read from a clipboard. My wife, still slouched on the couch like the wind had been punched out of her, finally managed a full sentence. "Wait, what is this? What are you talking about?" She wasn't defending him. Not really. Just trying to find the nearest lifeboat before the deck started tilting too hard. The folder was still on the kitchen counter. Untouched. Mason moved like it was radioactive. Hesitated. Then snatched it up with both hands and popped it open, almost defiantly, like maybe it would just be old tax statements or an emotional monologue in paper form. Instead, his eyes locked. He didn't flip the page. He didn't need to. The first sheet was a printed log of his company email metadata. Time-stamped forwardings to a non-secure Gmail account. File titles matched sensitive projects. Curtis, Keelridge, and one particularly volatile early-stage defense tech startup with multi-million-dollar NDAs attached. The second page listed flagged messages from Slack. Keyword hits. Leverage. Leak. They'll never trace it. The third? Voice-to-text transcript of a drunken voicemail he sent to a former coworker at 1:37 a.m., bragging that he had a folder so hot it'd blow the CEO's wrinkled ass into early retirement. Page 4 was blank. On purpose. Just a header that read, "This record has been digitally preserved in accordance with internal code blue policy. Evidence certified for escalation upon direct executive authorization." And that's exactly what I had done. Mason's lips moved like he wanted to read it out loud, but no sound came. He closed the folder, then opened it again, like maybe the contents would change. Russell walked past him, didn't acknowledge the folder at all, just leaned toward me, voice barely above a whisper. "PR is prepping draft statements," he said. "Board wants to know if we're pulling the trigger tonight or tomorrow morning." I didn't answer yet. Instead, I turned to Mason, who was now clutching the folder like it could shield him. "You leaked sensitive materials from a device registered under your company profile. used public Wi-Fi on a flagged, unsecured network, and discussed deal intel on a call with an unvetted podcast host, I said flatly. You even emailed a client list to your personal inbox the night after your second-round interview. Idiotic and predictable. I didn't, he croaked, but I cut him off. You did, and you were warned. Page 6 is the audit trail. IP, device ID, and your name on the access log. At 2:13 a.m., right after you left that bar in Westchester. Remember? His face drained. His lips started forming a denial, but the words stalled. The timestamps were too precise. The details too tight. This wasn't a setup. It was a reveal. He looked at Russell. You can't just take his word. Russell barked a dry laugh. His word? Mason, your access to our internal systems was revoked 12 minutes ago. You're already locked out. Your desk is being cleared as we speak. HR was looped 10 minutes before I got in the car. You think we start with the CEO when we move on someone like you? My wife stood up now, arms trembling. Is this really happening? Mason turned to her like she might help. Tell them, come on. Tell them this is a mistake. She backed up. That was all she did. Just stepped away. He looked stunned. Like betrayal was suddenly something he could taste. I walked past them both and leaned over the kitchen counter. The real tragedy, I said, unscrewing the cap from the water bottle I'd left there earlier, is that you thought all of this was about her. Mason's mouth opened, then closed. Then he sat down, slow, like someone had cut the strings holding his knees. His silence wasn't acceptance. It was the start of understanding, and it was only just beginning. Russell's phone buzzed twice in his pocket. He looked down, went pale. Legal just pinged again, he said. They've already been contacted. It's going external. Press might have a tip. Mason's eyes flicked toward him, then toward me, then toward the door like he was calculating how fast he could get out. His skin was sheet white now, his jaw twitching like a man trying to swallow a bolt. You said press? His voice cracked on the second word. Russell didn't look at him. 2 journalists already flagged the Curtis leak. One's asking why our compliance team missed it. They're naming you. Mason staggered backward like he'd been hit in the gut. I didn't know, I thought. You used company devices, Russell snapped. All civility gone now. You logged into Slack from your work laptop, forwarded encrypted briefings to your Gmail, and, he gestured to me, stunned. You sent voice notes from your company phone to an outside contractor? About the CEO? I took a step closer. Quiet. Calm. The kind of calm that makes people panic more than shouting ever could. You said I was a ghost, I murmured. A nameplate. You sent audio clips of yourself bragging that I'd never find out because I was too old to matter. Mason opened his mouth, desperate to summon something. Anything. To stop this train from crashing. I didn't know you were, he tried. That's the problem, I said, cutting him off. You didn't know. You didn't care. You thought anonymous meant irrelevant. You thought I was the kind of man who gets replaced. His voice went small. You were just in the background. I nodded slowly. I said. And that's exactly why I saw everything. Behind me, my wife backed away without realizing it. She'd been frozen for minutes, sinking into the couch, fingers knotted in her shirt hem. But now she stepped back, slowly, like maybe if she moved quietly enough she could melt through the floorboards. Wait, she whispered. You're not just... She trailed off. Couldn't finish the sentence. I turned my head, looked her dead in the eye. I'm not just anything, I said. Not anymore. She blinked, lips parted. I could see her rewinding the last 2 years, trying to calculate what she might have said, what she might have laughed at, what she dismissed when I said, I'm still involved, just not visible. Mason, meanwhile, was unraveling in real time. He clutched the counter for balance, the folder still hanging from one hand like a dead limb. You wouldn't actually fire me over this, right? It's not even firing you. Russell interrupted. Son, you're done. That ship's not only sailed, it sank. I've got 5 emails from legal and a red flag from HR that's glowing like a reactor core. I didn't leak everything. Mason pleaded, desperate now. Just a couple teasers. Everyone does it. Everyone tries to build buzz. You don't build buzz with a signed NDA, I said. You build lawsuits. You endangered the Curtis acquisition, exposed our early intel on Keelridge, and risked a multi-million-dollar defense contract. But sure, let's call it buzz. He looked at my wife again, desperate now, eyes pleading. She looked down. Not a word. Not a sound. Just shame blooming silently across her face like ink and water. This can't all be happening, Mason said. You set me up. You planned this. I shook my head. No, I said. You walked right into it. I just made sure the lights were on when you did. Behind him, Russell's phone buzzed again. PR wants a quote, he said. They're going to preempt the leak. Control the story. I looked at Mason. Give them this. We trusted the wrong man, and we corrected it fast. He collapsed onto the bar stool, finally out of defiance. Not sitting, collapsing, like a marionette whose strings had finally given out. And in that moment, I saw the man not as a threat, but as exactly what he was. A footnote. And I hadn't even turned the page yet. The silence was broken by vibration. A faint, stuttering buzz from the kitchen island. Then another. Then another. My wife's phone lit up first. 3 missed calls. Then a flurry of texts from her sister. What is happening? I'm hearing things I don't understand. Are you okay? Is that true about Mason? She grabbed the phone like it might explain something before she had to ask me. Her eyes darted across the screen, scanning rapidly, jaw tightening. Then Mason's phone lit up. A banner across the top. HR department, urgent. Another from a number he didn't recognize. Then another. And another. He didn't answer them. He stared at the screen like it had betrayed him. Why are they calling me? He whispered. Why would they be calling me now? Because now had finally arrived. He fumbled with the phone, thumb hovering over the screen like he might reject the whole reality if he just didn't tap, accept. Then came the message that punched through his last wall of denial. A single line from the head of internal investigations, sent via encrypted SMS. You are not authorized to delete any company property. A legal hold has been initiated. Mason's whole body flinched. He looked up at me, trembling now. His voice broke. You set me up. I walked past him. Didn't even look at him. Opened the fridge. Grabbed one of the waters he hadn't touched. Took a long sip. Cold. Clean. Familiar. Then I turned around and met his eyes. No, I said flatly. You volunteered. He blinked. What? You walked in here thinking you were stealing something, I said. But you handed over everything the second you opened your mouth. But I didn't leak, he started. You did, I said. Maybe not the full PDFs. But voice notes, screenshots, teasers. Enough to trigger legal, enough to get Curtis nervous, and enough to set our PR team on fire. I didn't know, he muttered. I didn't know who you were. You didn't care who I was. I could feel my wife behind me, still scrolling her screen, her breathing shallow. Her hands were shaking now. Every few seconds her screen lit up with a new notification. Her sister again, then a college friend, then a message from someone I recognized. Lacey, a mutual friend from the yoga group she always swore wasn't gossipy. Is that your Mason in the news? You're trending. It's bad. Is Tom really the founder? What? She stared at those texts like they were in another language. Because until that moment, she had never Googled me. Never asked questions about the boring business I ran from the guest office. She once called me a quiet engine, said I kept things running while she focused on living. And now the quiet engine was roaring back to life, and she didn't know where to stand. Mason was spiraling. He checked the HR message again. Then his email. Already locked out. He opened Slack. Error. Teams. Error. Internal dashboard. Gone. He looked at me like a man who just realized the fire had started under his feet 20 minutes ago. What happens now? He asked, voice cracking. Now. I said. Now you get to see how much oxygen you really had. Russell stepped in again, checking his watch. We have a call with legal in 12 minutes. Do you want me to initiate full severance cancellation? I nodded once. Pull everything. Mason snapped his head up. Wait, everything? That's not. You violated compliance, Russell said. Multiple times. The second we forward your phone logs, legal will initiate the clause. You're lucky we're not pursuing criminal. My wife finally found her voice. What clause? Russell glanced at her, then at me. I shrugged. Let him answer. Clause 14.3b, he said. Standard corporate protection. Breach of trust, internal sabotage, and reputational risk equal forfeiture of options, bonuses, and immediate removal from equity consideration. It's all in the paperwork. Mason's mouth hung open. His hands trembled. But I had equity promised. Not anymore. He turned to her like she could stop the bleeding. Tell them I didn't mean it like that. Tell them this is crazy. She stepped back. Again. Then did something Mason had never seen before. She looked at me. Not to beg, but because she finally understood who held the air in the room. And Mason? He was choking on it. I didn't slam the door. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need a grand exit. Just a quiet step back from the wreckage. They stayed frozen in place as I walked past them. Him still gripping the edge of the kitchen island like it might stop the ground from giving way. Her holding her phone like it might explain the moment better than her own memory could. I moved past them like they weren't even there. like they were furniture I decided not to take with me in the divorce. Russell followed, his gait uneven, half formal, half panicked. The professional mask he'd worn when he first entered had cracked somewhere between the folder and the phone calls. Now he looked like a man who just realized he'd been delivering coffee to a king dressed as a janitor for the last 5 years. He caught up at the front door, lowering his voice. "Sir, I had no idea. I didn't stop walking. Just pushed open the door and stepped out into the cold night." "You weren't supposed to," I said. He followed me outside, voice dropping even further. "If I'd known, I never would've." "You did what everyone does," I cut in. "You saw confidence and volume and assumed it meant competence. You saw me not speaking and thought it meant I wasn't watching. That's not on you. That's the design." He swallowed that. No comeback. No defense. The porch light cast a faint orange hue over his face. It made the sweat on his brow glisten like guilt. He looked down at his phone. "What now?" "Start drafting the termination," I said. "Use internal breach language, keep it tight, and prep a soft release for PR. Delay the press for 24 hours if you can. And get legal to double confirm clause 14.3b before we push." "Understood." He hesitated like he wanted to say something more, but I wasn't interested in moral reflection. This wasn't a teaching moment. It was cleanup. I stepped off the porch, walked toward the car I had parked down the block, intentionally. Out of sight, like everything else I'd been for years. Behind me, through the open door, I heard her voice, my wife, or whatever she was now. Desperate, breathless, just loud enough to echo across the yard. "Tom. Wait. Tom. Please." I didn't stop, didn't turn, didn't flinch. She shouted again. My name, now laced with something closer to need than anger. I kept walking. The gravel crunched under my shoes in a rhythm so calm it probably made her panic more. Because I wasn't storming off. I wasn't slamming doors or breaking furniture. I wasn't giving her a final speech. I was just done, and she had no idea how to fight that. That's the problem with people who feed on drama. Silence terrifies them. Especially when it's coming from the one person they thought they'd already destroyed. I reached the car, got in, shut the door behind me. From the windshield, I could still see the house. The warm kitchen lights casting two long, misshapen silhouettes inside. Mason was sitting now, slumped like a man who'd been hit by a truck his own arrogance built. She was pacing, on the phone, likely calling everyone she thought could fix it. Her sister, maybe her friend from the gym, possibly even my lawyer. It didn't matter. What mattered was that neither of them had expected the exit. Certainly not this exit. They expected a broken man. They got a buried king rising from the dirt with a ledger full of receipts and no more reason to keep them quiet. I looked at the dashboard clock. 8:49 p.m. Not even 2 hours since I walked through that door. 2 hours. 15 years of marriage. 6 months of betrayal. 42 minutes of cold strategy. And now, the rest of their lives to sit in it. The sunrise the next morning didn't feel symbolic. It just felt quiet. I watched it from the 43rd floor, glass walls stretching eastward, the city still half asleep, unaware it was about to chew and swallow a story built on arrogance, ambition, and carelessness. I didn't go home. I didn't need to. What they called home was already scrubbed from the deed, digitally reassigned through a quiet transfer clause she signed years ago without reading. The night before, while Mason clung to the kitchen counter and she screamed after me, a pre-signed packet was delivered to my legal team. Finalized. Recorded. The house was mine. Their names were already dust. By 6:17 a.m., news alerts started hitting phones across the finance world. Leaked audio triggers executive firing at major firm. Curtis deal jeopardized after insider info surfaces. Anonymous CEO returns amid internal breach. His face was there, red-eyed from a corporate photo crop. Her name was there too, just a line below, flagged as personal associate to the accused. The photo they used was from a gala she dragged me to 4 years ago, where she'd laughed about how invisible I was. Now that invisibility was gone. At 9:03 a.m., I entered the office lobby. The front desk didn't recognize me. Not really. They gave me that polite, neutral glance reserved for high-level vendors or aging consultants. Until the VP of Strategy, Nora, saw me from across the hall and froze mid-step. "Mr. Halberd?" she whispered. I nodded. One word. "Good morning." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. Then she stepped aside. Elevators whispered closed behind me. And in that tiny, mirrored box, I saw what Mason never did. A man who had never really left, just stepped out of view long enough for weeds to grow. The 42nd floor was full of whispers when the doors opened. Eyes darted. Emails paused mid-keystroke. A young associate dropped a reusable coffee cup trying to stand. I didn't slow down. I didn't acknowledge the noise. Because ghosts don't need applause. They only need doors to open. The boardroom was glass-paneled, overlooking the skyline. 10 seats. 7 filled. 2 executives from Curtis were patched in remotely, small windows glowing on the video wall. They were still in damage control mode, still figuring out how deep the breach went. But when I walked in, everything stopped. Someone didn't catch who said, "Sir?" And I took my seat. Not a guest chair. Not the ones flanking the screen. The head of the table. The seat that hadn't been used in over 4 years. I sat, folded my hands, looked around. Silence. Then, finally, I said, "Let's begin." No speech. No theatrical monologue. Just a start. The real one. They leaned in. The power shifted so subtly it didn't need confirmation. There was no "welcome back." No, "we're so glad you're here." They knew. The air had changed. The old guard was back. The curtain was pulled. Somewhere, maybe an hour later, Mason would wake up to his new reality. Bank accounts frozen pending legal review. Email inboxes locked. A flurry of "we regret to inform you" from contacts who no longer returned calls. My wife, ex-wife, pending, would start piecing together the timeline. She'd realized the wine club subscription was under my name. The lease on her car had expired last month. The shared savings account was never shared. I didn't need revenge. I just needed them to see the truth. They were guests in a world I built. They tried to take the furniture, but I held the land. And now, the builder was back. Not to repair, to reign.